Welcome to the Transform Sales Podcast, where forward-thinking business leaders come to share their experiences and ideas, learn from each other, and amplify their results together.
Welcome to another episode of the Transform Sales Podcast. I am here today with Nick, founder from Air Traffic Control, on another sales software review episode. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Eddie.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I want to get started talking about Air Traffic Control, a tool for chief marketing officers and B2B who want to improve pipeline with a one-to-one account-based marketing program. Tell us a little bit more about this. What does this mean? What can someone in the audience expect from Air Traffic Control?
Yeah, it's great. So, I think ABM and account-based experience, which I think is really the right acronym for us to be moving towards, because it is an overall go-to-market motion, but everybody kind of is more familiar with ABM. But it's really, I think, been confused by a lot of the vendors that are in the market, right? They've been defining it as being about intent data and this third-party kind of stuff and advertising tools. The reality is great account-based experience programs run all the way from awareness to turning existing customers into evangelists. And that means that you have to think about how it is that you approach ABM and ABX in a completely different way. And so the way that we think about it here is, what are the fundamental building blocks of great relationships at every single touch point that you have? And when we talk to CROs and CMOs, a lot of what we hear is it's about content, it's about delivering value, it's about putting the right things in front of people at the right time. And so what we built at Air Traffic Control was a product that plugs in right now chiefly to HubSpot, builds an interest graph down at the person level for every single contact that's there, whether they're a brand new prospect, someone who's in pipe, someone who's recently converted or been a long-time customer. And we're able to take that interest graph and predict the best of a company's content, blogs, YouTube videos, podcasts from Spotify, case studies, help materials, whatever it might be, and stick them back in to HubSpot so that when our customers are creating emails and web experiences and chatbot responses, they can just as easily as saying dear first name, drop in recommended blogs and case studies and help materials and all these other different types of assets, so that from the very beginning of their relationship all the way through the end of life, in that life cycle, they can give the very best of what they have to every single person that they're connecting with.
Excellent. I think that's something that you started with something important, saying intent. A lot of people think intent is account-based marketing. And I saw a discussion earlier that said on LinkedIn, if intent was as good as the providers say it is, why don't they set up their own private equity firms and just sell those products that they know they have pretty good intent for? And it's only scratching the surface at some point. Ultimately, account-based is about not just converting a target or, let's say, a characteristic of an ideal persona, but specific names, specific companies, regardless of how many people, how many champions you have to interact within that target account. And that brings up a few challenges. And as you said, identifying based on every champion or every person that I may want to touch on my target account, where are they in their journey and what type of material can I provide out of my assets that will really push the needle a little bit, enlighten them, maybe make them awareness, push them into the consideration stage. That's a little bit complex. You mentioned your program plugs in with HubSpot to facilitate this when you're prospecting already on HubSpot. But what would you say are the alternatives that your customers were using before they acquired Air Traffic Control to try to manage this conversation with multiple key contacts within their target accounts?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's really kind of two things that are going on in the orgs that we work with. They might be thinking about or evaluating or even wishing they could afford a major quote unquote ABM program. This would be a demand base, a Rollworks, Sixth Sense, Terminus, these types of tools. In the HubSpot customer ecosystem, by and large, those tools are frankly too expensive to even really meaningfully evaluate. In fact, they're 2 to 3 times as expensive as HubSpot is, which covers 90% of all of their engagement efforts. And so they're going to go and spend 3x on something that does 10% of the work. So we'll oftentimes find that people are thinking, gosh, I wish, but I really can't. The enterprise level, they might be thinking about some of those tools. Rollworks in particular has an interesting foothold in the HubSpot customer ecosystem, whereas the others really don't. But speaking of LinkedIn and LinkedIn threads, I just posted yesterday, or maybe it was this morning. I can't remember at this point. There is no such thing as ABM software. It's a preposterous concept that you would have a piece of software that would enable ABM soup to nuts, right? And those tools don't, right? They're largely ad targeting tools. And so what we find for the most part when we walk into these companies is that there are humans who are in the marketing organization building remarkably complex workflows and trying their very darndest to try to say, well, if someone's in segment A, then display content A. And for the most part, it's very human-handed. It's really difficult. It doesn't scale. It's a little bit better than throwing spaghetti against the wall. And it's actually something that we say to our customers during the sales process is you kind of have one of two decisions to make. You can tool up to enable yourself to really deliver one-to-one, or work on your messaging and actually get back to brand and get back to your core unique selling proposition and say it better to a smaller audience. That's not a bad strategy. It's a decent way to go. But that middle ground of working 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, just doesn't really hold up, and it doesn't really get you all that much more. A little more, which is why people do it, but not so much as to really make it worth it over just being better focused, with a smaller market, which again, it scares the board when we say we're going to go smaller. And that's where we come in, right? Is to say, all right, we can actually get you down to the one-to-one level. And that will enable all the other tooling that you rely on, like a HubSpot, to do 10x what you ever imagined it could do before.
Fear of missing out makes it a little bit dreadful to specialize, to hone in, but then efficiency is where that's going to mark a difference. I like that. Why don't we go ahead and jump into a quick screen share? We have spoken a little bit of the challenges. You mentioned, hey, there's not a one tool that's going to roof or umbrella all of these operations. So it's unrealistic to try to go that route. Something that you were hinting at is, hey, if you have HubSpot and you're running account-based marketing plays, account-based sales solutions or approaches, you're probably already overspending, especially because HubSpot doesn't let you get like one license and include all of the different modules. By then, you probably have the sales module, the marketing module, you're paying for invoicing, etc. So if you continue to Frankenstein the solution by adding more pieces of software that may not be as connected as you may wish they were, you're going to have, again, a Frankenstein solution. It's heavy, it's complex to use, and above all, it's expensive. So would really love to see what you have in store for us. Why don't we do a quick screen share and take a look at the features that your customers really love when it brings, that help bring account-based experience under one easier platform to manage.
Happy to do it. Okay, so we're on our homepage of air traffic control, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but the fundamentals are people can go directly through the HubSpot marketplace. They'll connect their HubSpot account, and the first couple of weeks that you're on board is completely for free. And as a result of you connecting, what'll happen is all your contacts in your HubSpot account will come over. And when those contacts come over, what we end up doing is looking at every email open, response, click, website visit, notes from sales calls. We use Zoom recordings, and the transcripts get appended to the contact record in our own HubSpot account. So again, speaking of other tools, Grain is great at this, Fathom is great at this, but then there's all that content that describes what somebody's interests are. And it's a lot more data that we're traditionally asking a sales rep to then process and try to figure out what to do with. So we take all that information and we build an interest graph, and that interest graph updates every single day. And for your cold contacts where you maybe don't know very much, you can even go in and socially enrich and pull in the entirety of someone's LinkedIn profile and everything that they've been posting to LinkedIn for the last 90 days. So you can even use this at your awareness efforts, right? And building at top of the funnel. But those interests then allow us to say, all right, of all the content that this organization has to share, what is the most interesting content for this individual? So you see all these content items down here under this recommended content list. So for this person, Gerald Abbey, right? I can click on this. And the reason that we've made these recommendations is our system also pulls in all of the company's content, everything from blogs to case studies to podcasts to YouTube videos. It does not matter what it is that a company has or where it is. We pull all of that in. Our system automatically understands what it's about. And then it says, well, based upon everything that I understand about this individual and everything that I know about all the content that's available, these are the things that we think that they're going to be really interested in. And as a result, what you can do is turn around and those properties get created inside of HubSpot. So now we're looking at our own HubSpot account here, and this is my personal HubSpot record.
Okay.
And you'll see here, there are all these personalization tokens. And you'll see that there's a ATC blog headline one and a blog image one and a link one and a meta description one and summary one. What we've done is we take all those recommendations and we break it into lots of very flexible properties, just super easy fields. Anybody that knows how to do, dear first name knows how to use air traffic control. So to be abundantly clear, there is no new functionality that you have to learn inside of HubSpot in order to take advantage of air traffic control. But what ends up happening is that if you go and let's say build an email, you can, build that email with these new fields, right? So here's a
All the
blog,
tokens. Yeah.
here's an image. And if we preview that, right, and we look at Nick Zeckets' email, this is the email that I would receive. And if this exact same email went out the door to our head of marketing, Julia Nguyen, this is the email that she would receive. No content tagging, no workflows, no segments. This is all happening down to the person level, and it works across email. And in fact, it also works across your web pages. You can use it in chatbot responses. You can even throw it in as a banner for returning visitors to your homepage. Really anywhere that HubSpot is in play for you, you can take all that information and just drop those really simple fields in. And so when I go to this web page, this is the experience that I would have. And again, completely changes down to the person level, and it's completely evergreen. And that's one of the really critical pieces of this. This page is going to change for me and everyone else tomorrow based upon everything new that the system has learned about me today, right? So, and then what we do is we turn around and we're able to say, well, not only do I know what you have that is optimal for every single individual in your HubSpot account, but we can also go a level further and say, and here are your gaps. We actually know how relevant you are to your audience overall, or to any of your smaller, kind of more critical focus audiences like your newsletter subscribers or your ABM target list. We can tell you what topics you need to cover in order to bridge that relevancy gap. So traditionally, we find a lot of marketing organizations and revenue teams really struggle to know where to focus their time and resources on enabling everything that's happening in the middle of the funnel and all the way through the sales process, right? We know how to use SEMrush and Ahrefs to research keywords to bring people into the top of the funnel, which is becoming a battlefield in and of itself, that SEO. But now what we're saying is based upon all this behavior, I know what you should be writing about to keep people moving through. Here's what's winning for organic search. Here's what your competitors have written about this subject matter. The other topics that you might want to also cover in a more comprehensive piece about, in our case, social media. All of these things are here to basically say, we're going to make far better use of the resources that you have. And we're going to take all of that intelligence to tell you where to spend your time next and quantify that at an actual person count level as to what you should keep writing about in order to retain this really strong level of relevancy to keep people moving through. Because functionally, half of ABM, ABX is content, right? The rest of it is mechanics, removing friction. And like I said before, there's no such thing as a comprehensive ABM platform. And people really need to start kind of dismantling that concept. Things like demand base are great ad targeting solutions, for B2B, but what they are not is an ABM program, right? It is a part of an ABM matrix of systems, and they're very valuable for large enterprises that are looking to generate demand in a paid way. But if you're thinking about the continuum of value, now I've gotten them into my funnel. Now they're a qualified opportunity. What do I do next? And this is really built around that idea of making sure that we make the best of everything that you have so that you can deliver a one-to-one experience across every single channel with those existing assets and telling you where to spend your time next in order to keep everything working really well.
That's very powerful, Nick. I want to highlight a couple of things that I really loved about this demo. So first, easy to pull in the leads. Everything goes into the dashboard. You're able to check whoever you brought in, make sure that the import was correct. Second, pull in the content library, the content repository of the company, but also I see how it's indexing not only the content that I have, but even the competitors. Like, what are they doing that may be more valuable and getting more traction so you don't miss out? They're putting great content out there. Do the same. Next, so I don't need to be updating or switching the set of fields because this set of fields were used on this day. No, just always point to those same fields whenever a campaign is blasted out. It will have the latest and greatest, basically. Is that correct, Nick?
That's right. Yeah, you don't have to refresh anything or use different fields. Now, I will say one of the things that we do is we provide 3 recommendations for every type of content that a company has for every contact. The reason for that being blogs serve a certain role in lifecycle. Case studies serve a certain role in lifecycle. Podcasts, webinars serve different kinds of roles in the life cycle, right? So we find that what customers will do, and they'll build full end-to-end life cycle programs with ATC. And in fact, we even have a HubSpot package where people can auto-install a complete end-to-end life cycle program in a click of a button with a whole bunch of great landing page and email templates. They don't even have to necessarily build them or be starting from anything. They can kind of go from scratch to launching a fully enriched one-to-one ABM kind of lifecycle program in a couple of minutes, which is really remarkable. But what's in those templates is if we're seeing that people are engaging with more and more blog content, we might branch and go send them a case study. And then we might say, all right, let me get you a layer deeper with a recorded webinar, right? I don't need to decide which one. I just know that our webinars are 45 minutes long. They're deeply engaging. They go through product in a really meaningful way, along with a customer kind of talking about that. That's our webinar strategy. You're showing increasing levels of depth and quality of behavior with me. And I want to keep pulling you into deeper and deeper engagement as a result, which is exactly how you take someone through a life cycle and get them back into a place where their engagement score starts to pop and they get moved right back in front of an SDR or an AE. So that they're enabled by somebody who's gotten tons of great content engagement, fully automated down to the person level. And now they're starting to say, I know why I want to use it. I know how I want to use it. I'm ready to talk at this point, right? Because we know 95% of our market isn't in market at any given time. So, we have to do a phenomenal job on life cycle. And this is a way to do that better than you could ever imagine.
It's something that I did notice also in some of the landing pages where you had not only the content that may be relevant to them, but also the calendar link so that, hey, you know what? I've really been nurtured. I've seen my articles. I convinced myself about the symptoms that I have that led me to understand the problem that I'm experiencing. And yeah, I just saw a couple of demos from you guys. Let's go ahead and book right here in the pages and tying it back to what you just said a minute earlier. Hey, you probably, if you haven't set up these landing pages, guess what? There's a package where you pay, you get all of the templates. We know the fields. We index your material, index your leads. Boom, you'll have your one pagers, your templates, your outbound, etc. Everything set up and ready to go. That's very, very, very powerful. Workflows, as we said, is there in the back end. No need to leave HubSpot, but something that really, really makes a difference, as you said it. If you have an idea, a hypothesis of what type of content goes where for what audience and a clear mapping of that, fine, go ahead and try that. But when you don't have that and you know that the account-based approaches was really going to help you, then you may deploy your first hypothesis, but then you're going to be scratching your head, waiting for some data to tell you, hey, maybe this was the best conversion. So let's try to iterate that. Now you have a way to, through data, through that in the back end of what has converted and what not, you'll be able to guide your customers into, hey, these are the pieces that you need to create next. You have a ton of awareness content, but you don't have no testimonials. How are you going to convince these people that I'm priming ready to go? They just need that extra nudge. Well, guess what? Here are some case studies. Here are what your competitors are doing in terms of case studies so that you can kind of mimic that template, mimic that style, and maybe create your own content. That I felt was super duper powerful. You are guiding your customers as to where to spend their time next. I heard that sentence. I think that's very powerful. A lot of times is, hey, I know what I need to do as a one step further. I go buy that, deploy it. What's the step two? I'm expecting this company to tell me. Sometimes they don't. So they're back to square one. All right, scratching heads, back to the drawing board. What do we do next? I love that there's something here when it comes to air traffic control. I have a question for you, Nick. What would you say are the tasks, deliverables, or people that will be involved in setting up air traffic control? If I have already HubSpot, do I need a HubSpot admin, etc.? How long would you say it takes your typical customers to reach full-time productivity? How much time and resources?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, like any good marketer, the answer is it depends. So, in terms of the technical aspects of the install, it's any business user. There is no technical requirement. You do not have to set up properties. You don't have to do mapping. You don't have to do any of those things. So the second that you connect your HubSpot account, you literally sign in to air traffic control with your HubSpot account one time, and you're done. That is the technical side of the setup. Now, in terms of these templates that we have, that's really something that we built in response to realizing that a lot of HubSpot customers don't have a great marketing operations person on staff. Like they have someone who does HubSpot in addition to 9 other things, right? They're a team of 4 or 5. They don't have a team of marketing operations people like you might find in a large Salesforce Marketing Cloud or Marketo customer instance. They usually have MOPS people who know those tools inside and out. And somebody has to draw on a whiteboard like this one back here and just say, this is what I want my campaign to look like. And then you can go and make it happen. Now we've built these easy workflows that you might say, oh, now that I've gotten started, I've got some ideas on other ways I might branch it, or I want to, test out whether or not a case study or a podcast works best at this touch point, right? Like those are all interesting things, but you need to get to a place where you can actually see emails and landing pages changing by contact in your own HubSpot environment. And that's something that we've worked really hard over the last couple of months in particular to supply to our customers. And it's an instant kind of activation. What we effectively say to our customers is, we want to help you launch a limitlessly scalable 1-to-1 ABM program in under 2 weeks. And we know that is possible regardless of the complexity of the organization. Politics aside, right? There might be arguments there, but where we do see some issues, organizations that have a checkered content past can sometimes go a little slow in the beginning, right? So back in 2019, all of our blogs were written by interns, right? They're not that good, but they're on the website. Well, you need to make a decision about whether or not you're going to improve them or remove them, right? And we have features that allow you to remove content from being able to be recommended. But me personally, I think that if you're in a position where you think that something isn't good enough to recommend, it's not good enough to be on your website, right? So sometimes customers will take that as an opportunity to go through a content renewal process and really refreshing that, getting it better, taking stuff down. And that might take them a month. It's worth it, right? Because that content's got high bounce rates, low scroll depth. It's just not performing very well. It's not doing what content's meant to do. It's just kind of SEO stuffing nonsense, and it's just not very performant from a pipeline perspective. It's just vanity metrics that it's been stuffing.
And it may be hurting them actually. When a potential buyer reads it, it's like, what is this? It doesn't really have any value, any meat to the bone.
That's exactly right. And if you think that any of your content could hurt a buyer's consideration, you absolutely should be getting rid of it or improving it. And that's something that's really a kind of it's a bit of a reckoning for some of the organizations that maybe went through a period of time where the blog was a thing they did, but there wasn't much strategy around it. There wasn't much executive top-down support for real content strategy and quality of content. And so that can take people a little while to kind of go through and go, okay, let's take this one offline, take this one offline, take this one offline. Okay, now we're ready. But that's really the only thing that'll slow things down. It did used to be that people were trying to figure out, it's like, what problem am I going to use this to solve for? But now that we've got these packages where you can just auto install things, you could take one of the email templates out and just use it as your newsletter at this point, right? It's all personalized content, updates every time it goes out the door. So if that's just your really hard, tough problem, great, it's in the package. But if you want to go end-to-end life cycle, the whole thing is there for you. So that's really worth kind of getting into.
Okay. My last question then for today, before I let you go, Nick, what would you say is the KPI or the success criteria that your customers should use to measure whether air traffic control is really working for them or not?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few canaries in the coal mine early on, right? So if you see your click-through rate on emails improving, you should be seeing your pages per website visit, your time per website visit. Those things should all be improving really pretty instantly. The second that you start deploying ATC recommendations, so long as it's not, 70, 80% down the way of your email newsletter, where nothing is going to have much impact. You're going to see some pretty good things happen. We do actually quantify how much revenue your content has impacted. We know that for every piece of content, and we know it for all of your content in the aggregate. And so that's also a number that you're going to see start to trick up, particularly for each one of your content items. So every marketing team has kind of, in memory, once a year maybe, or once every couple of years, they'll do some incredible content campaign. They'll put a ton of resources around it. They'll get one amazing piece, like they'll write a book, right? Like, this is how to do ABM, right? And they'll do this big book, and it will influence a ton of revenue. And then everything else basically is touching very, very little because there's just not much utilization, right? And so one of the things that we'll find is, by looking back at this massive archive that people have, what we're effectively saying is, marketing and revenue teams have been behaving like librarians who only let you take out the book that was written this week.
Mm-hmm.
And Count of Monte Cristo is on the shelf behind them, right? And no one's allowed to read that anymore. We let everybody read that, 100 years ago, but now we don't even let you take that book out, right? We don't even talk about the fact that thing is behind us. It's a classic. It's phenomenal. It's always good, which, to your point, this is why you need to write phenomenal content. When you have ATC, it's going to live forever and be used forever, right? So high quality content is an absolute mandate of great marketing. And now it's easier to make the case to do that because it will get utilized over and over and over again every time it's worthwhile. So it really kind of changes the mindset, and it puts people back in the middle of content production as opposed to generative AI, which still is not at a place that's more performant than your average high school C student, and it's just not terribly compelling. So,
Right.
We also find that people are getting time back, right? They're producing higher quality content. They're not worried about complex workflows. They're worried about what's the value that we can add to the market. And the value is not a complex workflow. The value is amazing resources, great customer webinars, right? Like, how do we create more of that so that when stuff does go out the door, people get touched by things that are meaningful as opposed to just operational.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Nick, this has been a very informative session. Really love what you mentioned there at the end about the content attribution. I've seen that's something that a lot of times marketers really struggle with. How do we attribute this? The sales guys booking the appointments are getting all the credits. Well, now you can identify what pieces are pushing the needle for who and what stage. Keep them evergreen. That's something that I believe it's a good takeaway from this episode as well. Hey, we've been through the pandemic already. We've been through financial hardships. That's not going to go away. So we might as well just start writing pieces, not just for the next 1 to 2 years, but for the next decade, and leverage them, truly leverage them. Nick, it has been an amazing episode. For anyone in the audience, demand generation leaders, if you are curious and want to learn more about air traffic control, definitely go over to the CloudTask Marketplace. You'll be able to set up a meeting with Nick and his team. Nick, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope to catch you on a future one.
Thank you very much.